So, welcome everyone. It's good to see many familiar faces and anyone who might be joining us for the first time. Um, Welcome, and it's a lovely community you're coming into. If this is your first time, and very very welcoming. The classes are offered under the auspices and under the organization of Insight Meditation Community of Washington, IMCW, which has been in existence for more than 25 years, founded by Tara Brach and many, many teachers in the um, DC and Maryland, Virginia area, and some maybe a little beyond as well. And lovely community. And as part of this community, we have our own um, Center for Mindful Living, which was formerly known as formerly located in Tenleytown, when we had a space there for more than 10 years, I think, until we had to let go of it, as many other and many other small businesses and things, organizations had to do with COVID, paying thousands of dollars every month for rent for space we weren't using. So there was some sadness and loss around that. But the wonderful thing is that the community is very, very vibrant online, and many of the folks here are very active parts of the community and lead sessions and attend sessions and whole variety of areas, from poetry to storytelling to gardening to just kind of many, many things, as well as every meditation every day of the week, really. And just a lot of lovely offerings. You'll hear more about those at the end with the announcements. So a very warm welcome to everyone. I'm Hugh Byrne. I've been teaching with the Insight IMCW for 20 years now, actually. I began with IMCW. I began teaching in 2000 and began with IMCW in 2003. I was going to say 2023. 2003, just getting, actually the history was quite interesting. Tara organized a meeting up at River Road where she was teaching around the impending war in Iraq. And I'd been involved in various activities elsewhere and had done some what they call yatras, pilgrimages, silent peace walks in Europe and in Israel. And we organized, out of that meeting, we organized a silent peace walk. Maybe some of you attended it, probably a month or a few weeks before the shock and awe began, try to stop the war before it began. And it was a lovely experience because we all walked in silence from the National Cathedral down to the Islamic Center on Massachusetts Avenue, past all the embassies and the places of worship. And it was a very powerful thing to walk in silence, because mostly on demonstrations it's, hey, hey, ho, ho, da, 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 has got to go, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and all of those things. And, a lot of energy, and sometimes it's kind of a angry energy. And it was lovely to just do that silent peace walk. And I think for many of us it was very, very memorable. For those of us who went, didn't succeed as a million people in London and Paris and etc. and New York and etc. war, but we continue to organize and continue to try and bring our practice into the world, which is very much at the heart of what I care about in terms of these practices and teachings. And so anyway, that's just a little bit of an aside, but a bit of a historical kind of background to, so I've been involved with IMCW for 2 decades now, coming year. And we've had a Sunday morning session, actually going back to 2000. always in person. When we were in person around, we began in Woodley Park and we went up to the Tenley Town area, and we had weekly sessions, as some of you may remember, over Z-Burger, where they played electronic music, and we used that as our meditation for the second meditation practice of kind of being present with the techno music, So it was an interesting experience, and then we moved up to where the centre was, where our good friend Pleasance had a yoga studio, and we had our sessions there for a while. Again, just a little bit of history. And now we're online and hoping to come back in person in relatively soon. We're thinking in the fall, but just given things are still pretty much up in the air for the weekly sessions or for the regular sessions, we will wait until things seem fairly clear, although they may never be 100% clear. And we are getting back together for retreats and particularly for retreats, weekend retreats, week-long retreats. So that's great, under careful conditions, etc. So again, welcome everyone. It's lovely to be together. I hope you're happy Labor Day weekend to everyone in the US, and which is the vast majority of us, but not quite all of us. And hope things are going well. I was just saying before when we were talking informally that I'm grateful this weekend to not be traveling, just to be at home. It's a great weekend for a staycation, to not be flying or on the freeways. So I'm grateful for that, and good to see everyone's friendly, smiling faces. For anyone who is new to this class and these sessions, the format is a very simple one. We typically begin with a period of meditation of 15, maybe 20 minutes or so, to help us arrive and settle, and just to bring awareness to whatever we're experiencing moment to moment. Many of you, I think most of you, very familiar with the practice. And then I'll give a short talk. Typically it's around 25 minutes or so, 25 to 30 minutes when I'm disciplined. Hopefully I'll be disciplined. And then Emily leads us in some mindful movement. It's lovely to be able to kind of get into our bodies and do some movement. So always look forward to that. Thank you, Emily. And then we'll come back. We'll have a period of sharing, typically in small groups, break into breakout groups, or within the full group, with questions or anything anyone would like to share. And then we finish with normally a shorter meditation, might just be 3 or 5 minutes, maybe a little bit longer depending on time. And then we finish with some announcements of upcoming activities. So that's kind of more or less the format. We normally, this Zoom room remains open during lunch for a while, at least half hour or so, and just for some sharing, afterwards. It's a lovely way of connecting. Typically, I'm not able to stay for too long because I'm teaching all morning, and I normally have things I have to take care of. But at least it's an informal way of being together and sharing. So again, welcome everyone. And so what we'll do is we'll begin with a meditation. I'm going to do my own recording of this if I can. So let yourself arrive and settle, finding a comfortable seated posture or lying down, or if you're walking, just coming into the body, letting the attention kind of drop out of the thinking mode as much as possible, and just come down into the body. Feel the contact of your body with the surface beneath you. If you're sitting, just feel the weight of gravity pulling you down, pushing the weight, pushing down into the buttocks and the thighs, and the contact with the seat or the cushion beneath you. Just opening to the sensations, warmth, coolness, hardness, softness. Just letting the back be straight, inviting the shoulders to relax. Let the chest be open so you can breathe easily. So maybe taking a nice deep in-breath, long, slow out-breath. Perhaps a few longer, deeper breaths, just to let you arrive and settle, just being here now with whatever is present. Breathing in, calming the body. Breathing out, calming the mind. Letting your breathing help you just settle into being here. It's being here. It's reflecting on the lines from Mary Oliver's poem, The Wild Geese. She says, you do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Letting the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Just letting yourself be here, be present for what's alive for you right now. Touching into the aliveness of the body, your breathing, the air on your skin, contact of your clothing with your skin, contact of your body with the floor, with the chair, maybe with your hands with your knees or your thighs or with each other. Just letting yourself be here, right now, with your experience just as it is. You can make any adjustments to be as comfortable as you can be. And then the invitation is just to open to what's present. Obviously, if something is out of alignment or tense, you might make an adjustment at any time, maybe take a deeper breath. Basically, just opening to what's here, what's present right now, with kindness, with care, with acceptance. Just feeling your breath, feeling the waves of your breathing. And letting the breath come and go. Like waves coming and going, or like a soft breeze coming, going, passing. Opening to your experience just as it is right now. As Dorothy Hunt says, peace is this moment without judgment. This moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. So bringing a kind and non-judging awareness to your experience right now. You could let your attention rest on whatever you're experiencing in the body, bodily sensations, and just letting them come and go in their own time. No need for resistance or struggle or clinging. Just let them rise and pass. Or you could bring awareness to your emotions, mood, mind states. You know, what's going on in the mind and the body in terms of how you're feeling right now. You know, maybe there's some sadness present. And often when we feel something that doesn't feel too comfortable, we kind of push it to the side or cover it up. And the invitation of our practice is just to make space for it. You know, make space if there's sadness, you know, sadness about a memory or a thought, someone or something, you know, a difficult relationship you wished were different or you wish were different. And rather than kind of pushing it away, to just make space for it, not to get lost in any story about it, but just the kind of the very bare experience. You know, there may be some heaviness or fluttering around the heart, or maybe a little wateriness around the eyes. Just to allow what's here to be here, to come and go. And see what happens when you open to your experience in this way, rather than either pulling or pushing it away. It's coming into a non-clinging relationship with what's present. And you might let your attention rest on your breathing if that's helpful as an anchor for your awareness. It can be particularly helpful if the mind is kind of flitting around, very busy, very active. Just when you do notice the mind has gone off, just coming back to your breathing. Just this simple awareness of breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in, knowing you're breathing in. And breathing out, knowing you're breathing out. Making space for whatever is present. The relationship with your experience is really the critical thing. Not so much what we're experiencing, but our relationship to what we're experiencing. What we're experiencing will change. Some of what we experience will be pleasant, some will be unpleasant, some will be kind of somewhere in the middle. It's all changing. And the invitation is to really pay attention to our relationship to what we're experiencing. Am I meeting this moment with acceptance, with kindness, without judgment? Or am I meeting this experience with a tightening up, resistance, a pushing away, or if it's pleasant, a holding on? It's not that we're doing something wrong or failing in some way when we do this, but it's just, it doesn't lead ultimately to our happiness and well-being. You've all heard what you resist persists. And what you cling to, what we cling to, just leads to more clinging. We know this, don't we? If we keep feeding the clinging, then what do we get? We get more clinging. So just noticing and see if we can just let whatever's here come and go in its own time. Without resistance, without judgment. share this poem by Mary Oliver. I've shared many of Mary Oliver's poems, but I haven't shared this one here before. This is the Buddha's last instruction. Make of yourself a light, said the Buddha before he died. I think of this every morning as the east begins to tear off its many clouds of darkness to send up the first signal, a white fan streaked with pink and violet, even green. An old man, he sat down between two sala trees, and he might have said anything, knowing it was his final hour. The light burns upward, it thickens and settles over the fields. Around him the villagers gathered and stretched forward to listen. Even before the sun itself hangs disattached in the blue air, I'm touched everywhere by its ocean of yellow waves. No doubt he thought of everything that had happened in his difficult life. And then I feel the sun itself as it blazes over the hills, like a million flowers on fire. Clearly I'm not needed, yet I feel myself turning into something of inexplicable value. Slowly, beneath the branches, he raised his head. He looked into the faces of that frightened crowd. Breathing in, breathing out. This moment without judgment. This is an ancient, Chippewa saying. Sometimes I go around pitying myself, and all the while I'm being carried by great winds across the sky. So take your time, opening your eyes, coming back into the group. So welcome everyone, welcome again. Welcome anyone who's joined us since we began. Good to see you, Rose. Good to be with everyone today. And I hope your Labor Day weekend is going well. I hope you're relaxing and taking a little bit of time off from laboring and enjoying these late summer days. It's been, I found, very beautiful, very lovely. And we are, well, certainly where many of us are in the DC area. We got back from the beach in Rehoboth last weekend, and we've had a lovely few days this last few days. Now it's kind of getting a little warmer, but nice. So anyway, welcome to everyone. I'm going to move into the talk for today, and then Emily will lead us in some meditation. So, since I'm doing very well in my technology so far today, I'm recording these as well as we know it's being recorded by IMCW, but I'm also doing my own recording here, and we're going to begin the talk. And so the theme today of the talk is on ending suffering. And in some way, we could say every Dharma talk is really about, ought to be, let's say, about suffering and ending suffering. Sometimes more explicitly, sometimes less explicitly. And today, I want to talk a little more explicitly about suffering and the end of suffering. I'll share. The reason will come a bit clearer in the talk itself. But I want to just begin with the Buddha's statement of his teachings. He was once asked, to say as kind of pithily as he could, what are your teachings? What do you teach? And the Buddha said, I teach one thing, suffering and its end. I teach one thing, suffering and its end. So all of the Buddha's teachings are linked to and come back to, almost like spokes of the wheel, I think of it, come back to this central kind of axle, that central hub of suffering and the end of suffering. Suffering and how to end it in our lives. And as many of you know, the central teaching of the Buddha, the first teaching after his awakening, when he walked from Bodh Gaya to Varanasi, and gave a talk to his erstwhile meditation companions who were practicing austerities with him, these ascetic practices, but the Buddha saw that they weren't the path to ending suffering, so he went off on his own and he sat under the tree, and as we know, the rest is history. But he gives a talk to them, and his talk is on the turning of the wheel of the Dharma. It's on these Four Noble Truths. And it's the most important of the Buddha's teachings, because if we understand it and practice it, this teaching, it can change our life dramatically. Or we could put it another way, we can change our life dramatically by our own practice, through our own seeing, through our own insight. We can change our life dramatically. And it's actually a teaching that's, I'd say, relatively easy to understand, but not so easy to put into practice. And the reason, excuse me, the reason I think it's not so easy to put into practice is accustomed to our suffering. You could almost say we cling to our suffering. And it can take attention, diligence, even courage to see that there is a way out of suffering and to make the change, to take the steps we need to take to end suffering in our lives, or at least alleviate suffering significantly in our lives. The teaching can be stated actually quite simply, I think. And it comes down to this: when we cling, we suffer. When we let go of clinging, we let go of suffering. We end, or at least alleviate, suffering. There's a quote from the Buddha on this. He says, "One who understands clinging and non-clinging understands all the Dharma. One who understands clinging and non-clinging understands all the Dharma, understands all the teachings." And I think this is a wonderfully pithy statement, that if we get this teaching about clinging and letting go, like the fist, that sense of like holding on, and then the open hand of letting go. If we can understand this clinging and letting go, we really understand all of the teachings. It's not always easy, as as we know, as anyone really who's practiced has no doubt experienced. It's not always easy. That's why we need all of the other teachings. That's why we need the teachings about compassion towards ourselves and others, the teachings of loving kindness, of equanimity, of wise speech, wise action, all of these teachings, because they create the conditions really to help us let go of clinging. So that's why we need the path, which I'll talk about in a minute. So it's not easy, and that's why we need all of the other teachings, all of this, really amazing roadmap that the Buddha created of the human consciousness and of human actions in the world, how we live, how we act, and how we can untangle ourselves. So the Buddha taught there is a way out of suffering, a way to live freely in the world, whatever the conditions. Because what the Buddha's pointing to is a freedom that doesn't depend on conditions. It doesn't depend on feeling good or being healthy. It doesn't depend on the kind of day we're having, or whether we got out of the bed on the wrong side, as they say. It doesn't depend on that. It's a freedom that's not dependent on conditions. It's a freedom that comes from untying or untangling the knots that keep us locked in suffering and depending on things being a certain way for us to feel okay. Do you get the kind of the difference, that a freedom that doesn't depend on conditions versus a freedom that, oh, I'll be okay. Yes, I'll be happy if I'm not in a fight with my partner, if my health is good, all of these kind of ifs, all of these, they're just conditions, if the conditions are right. Any happiness dependent on conditions is not going to be a lasting happiness, because when the conditions change, then the happiness will change. So the Buddha's pointing to a happiness that is beyond conditions, not dependent on conditions. Just a brief thought experiment. Imagine, I'll burst into song now. No, I won't. Imagine no religion. We know. Imagine your own life as it is today. Your family situation, whatever that is. Imagine you have a partner or you don't have a partner, your spouse, whatever. And your work, it's just as it is, your health as it is now, your work as it is, your financial situation, that can affect us a lot, just as it is right now. Your friendships and the state of the country, my goodness, the state of the world, they're just as they are right now. where you could be happy. Imagine this. Imagine you could be happy without anything necessarily changing in the overall conditions. That it doesn't depend on who's president right now. It doesn't depend even on climate change. It doesn't depend on what happens, action take. That is actually not dependent on any of these conditions, however big these conditions are. So not needing to be healthier than you are, or wealthier than you are, or younger than you are, or have more friends, or have a different family, be in a different relationship, live in a less troubled world, but exactly as things are right now. No. You could ask the question in different ways. Is happiness possible just as things are right now? Which is not to say we never need to change anything, but I want to be very clear about that yes, sometimes things need to change, but they need to change from a place of acceptance of this is how things are right now. So can we be at peace with life as it is for you and me and all of us right now? Is freedom possible with just the conditions that exist right now? Because if we're going to need to change conditions in order for happiness to be possible, in order for freedom to be possible, then we're really always going to be dependent on having the right conditions. Yeah, no, if only this would change. Well, this changes, but then we'll tend to find something else that needs to change until we can find a happiness, a freedom that is unassailable, that is really unshakable by conditions. This is what the Buddha's teachings are pointing to. This is a really important question. Can we be happy? Can we be at peace moment in this moment as it is? Because most people, if they're not happy or that feel that life isn't entirely how they want it to be, think of their happiness or their inner freedom as being dependent on conditions changing or conditions remaining the same. Typically that something needs to change, something needs to be different. So the Buddha's teachings are different from, what I would say the common worldly understanding of happiness and well-being, that we have to get something or enough of things to be happy, to be peaceful, etc. The Buddha said one time, he said, what the world calls happiness, I call suffering. What the world calls suffering, I call happiness. What he's pointing to there is the world calls happiness getting, having, acquiring, all of these things, holding on to, protecting what we have, getting rid of what we don't like. That's what the world calls happiness. And he says that's suffering because it's really rooted in clinging, craving and clinging. He said what the world calls suffering, which is kind of renunciation. It's not renunciation necessarily of everything and going into a monastery. For some people it will be, but for many it won't. It's not necessarily that kind of renunciation, but it's really a renunciation of clinging, renunciation of holding that clinging. And the world calls that suffering. How could you not cling to how your football team is doing? How could you claim to watch the game dispassionately without really rooting for and getting depressed if your team loses and getting elated if your team wins? That's just an example of where we get hooked, on this, unhappy based on that. And the Buddha says that's dukkha. That's dukkha. What the world calls suffering, is really what is the letting go. I call that happiness, he says. I call that a happiness that doesn't depend on conditions, an unshakable happiness. So as I say, just to say that, you know, people often hear this and say, yeah, but isn't this just about passivity and not changing anything? No, it's not. It's about changing what needs to be changed, but from a different relationship with our own experience. So it's not from, I got to change the world because this person's doing these terrible things and I hate what they're doing, and the world will go to hell in a handbasket unless, you know, all of these ways we get tight and hooked. That's only brings that more clinging into the world, more conflict into the world. But if we can come into the world and change what needs to be changed from an open heart, from caring, but without clinging to the outcome of action. I think, as Krishna said to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, you know, and as the Buddha's teachings kind of point to, you know, that the change that's coming from an open heart, that's not coming from, it's got to, you know, from that place of clinging. And that's the key. And there's a lot that we can talk about that relationship with change. But I want to focus more today on this kind of internal working with our experience. You know, I've talked, as many of you know, who've been, you know, coming for a long time to the Sunday sessions. You know, I come back to some version of this theme, you know, fairly regularly. But I was inspired to come back again this week by something that was shared. I have on the, as some of you know, I have on the Insight Timer app a lot of meditations and talks, and I have a couple of courses on there, one on mindfulness and poetry and the other on mindfulness and habit change, which is kind of around the books I wrote on that area in that theme. And somebody was doing a 10-day course that I have on there on mindfulness and habit change, and she shared this feedback. And it really, I mean, I found it really poignant and powerful, and it really speaks to what I'm talking about and what this talk is about today, about suffering and the end of suffering, and about the Four Noble Truths. Even though she didn't frame it in those terms, but it's entirely about the Four Noble Truths. So I want to just share this with you. Share her feedback with you. She said, she was on day 4 of this 10-day course. She says, on day 4, and I just had this earthquake of a revelation. The urge, that was the habit, I think, that she was working to try and deal with, you know, could try and change. She said, the urge used to be sweets. And I realized before that it was cigarettes. And then, and she has capital letters then, I realized after cigarettes, it was drugs. And then it was sex. And then it was shopping. Kind of the whole multitude of things there. She said, and I really hear you say, stop and pay attention. And there's the revelation. It's really none of these things that matter. The food, the sex, the drugs, the sweets, etc. It's what I'm running from, what I'm avoiding that runs these cravings. She says, it's the dark, lonely emptiness, the longing. And none of these cheap fillers really change that feeling. They just mask it. The longing is for intangibles, love, comfort, kindness, peace. It's for the loveliness of life. And the drive, the craving, is to escape that feeling of hunger or hopelessness, or despair. I've been trying to bury those sweet needs instead of healing, so they can be satisfied. So satisfying the underlying longing or wanting or, you know, desire, wish. She says, what a ride this quick little meditation turned out to be. And then she says, thank you. So, that really, it really speaks to you. But this is somebody who was working with their own cravings, their own habits, and was really had this kind of light bulb moment listening to a talk on craving or talk on habits, and then just seeing clearly what she was doing. And I just want to, in a way, unpack what I read in what she shared from the standpoint of the Buddha's teachings about suffering and the end of suffering. So, just beginning with suffering, she speaks about the underlying unpleasantness, the angst. She speaks about the hunger, the hopelessness, the let's see the words she used. The hunger, the hopelessness, the despair. This really is the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. We just really have to identify, oh yeah, this is painful, this is difficult, this is unpleasant, this doesn't feel good. No more than that, just a simple truth of suffering, just to say, oh yes, I see this. And then the craving, she speaks about that, the food, the drink, the drugs, the sex, the shopping, each one kind of in turn replacing each other, and each one not leading to happiness. This is what's causing the suffering, this kind of the fist, the clinging, I want this, I need this. I'll only be happy if I have more of this. More of the sweets, more of the food, more of the drugs, more of the sex, more of the drink, more of the shopping, more of the shiny objects, etc. So the thinking that this thing, that the object of desire will provide happiness or peace. And this is the second noble truth. It's the truth of craving or clinging as the cause of suffering. It's getting into this relationship with our experience of wanting, of holding, that leads us to suffering, that leads to suffering, leads to dukkha. So this is the second noble truth. She speaks about it very clearly in how she describes her craving, her perhaps addiction at times. The realization and letting go of the clinging to any Tara Brach talks about the false refuges, the things we think that are going to make us happy that can't and won't make us happy. Whether it's I've got to have this, I've got to have this food, I've got to have this drink, I've got to have the drugs, etc. These false refuges, realizing that these are false refuges, that they can't bring us genuine happiness. Seeing this and letting go, this is the third noble truth, that letting go of clinging leads to the end of suffering. No, so we see it very clearly in the description that, I'm not really wanting these things. These are just, as she says, cheap fillers. I love that expression. Cheap fillers that mask the real underlying wish or desire, which I think is a wholesome desire. It's not a desire based on clinging. She speaks about it as the loveliness of life, the beauty of life, the things that we don't need to cling on to, joy that can arise without clinging, peace that can come without clinging, and that we can't cling to the joy and we can't cling to the peace because they are conditioned as well. They come out of conditions until we let go completely and experience a joy that's beyond conditions. Even joy and peace and well-being, all of those things are still conditioned. Something will come along and we won't feel that same joy. But hopefully if we've cultivated a deep joy in our life, gratitude, and all of these wholesome qualities, they will be available to us, so we can bring them into our hearts because they're familiar, because we have, as Rob Barbea speaks about, a deep inner reservoir of well-being, of deep inner reservoir of well-being that we'll be able to go to. These wholesome qualities that aren't, that don't depend on conditions. Yes, they come and go, but we don't need to. I mean, they're conditioned in the sense that we need to cultivate them, but they're a path. They're a wholesome path to a letting go completely. So this letting go of clinging leads to the end of suffering. And the practices that we cultivate, that we do in the practice together in the meditation or when we're practicing on our own, of being with our experience, with kindness, with acceptance, with bringing self-compassion to our experience, of not beating ourselves up or going to one of these false refuges. These are the practices that help lead us to the end of suffering. So all of the teachings we can think of, the Noble Eightfold Path, the ethical, wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood, the training of the mind in wise effort, wise mindfulness, cultivation of wisdom, the heart practices, they're all in service of ending suffering. The more we cultivate an open heart, the more we let go of afflictive states, the more then we incline our mind towards happiness and well-being, and ultimately to letting go, to freedom of the heart. That's the beauty and really the clarity of these teachings and practices. So in just this short 10 lines or so that this student, the practitioner, 12 lines that she shared, really all of the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, which are all of the Dharma, is in a way contained there. She wasn't intending to give a Dharma talk. She was just kind of saying, oh, this is what I experienced. And it was a big deal for me. It was a revelation. It's not so easy for me to give feedback, to these because of the algorithms and the technology. But what I wanted to really say to her as I thought about it afterwards is what's really important with these kind of realizations, these revelations, is that we let them go deep, that we really don't just kind of say, oh, that was a great insight. Because if we do, then it kind of bounces off, or it can bounce off. We don't really get the benefits of that insight. It's really important to let ourselves feel, oh yeah, I realize this. How can I stay with this? How can I come back? Not hold on to a realization, which we can't do anyway, but just really allow that realization, that insight to go deep. Keep coming back to it just as a reflection of, oh yeah, these refuges, these false refuges lead to suffering. True refuges I can find in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and remembering my own capacity for awakening, remembering coming back to the teachings, coming back to the Sangha, to the community. So I want to finish up in the next few minutes just by saying that the wonderful thing about this teaching, about this reflection the students shared, but the teaching of the Buddha on the Four Noble Truths, essentially, that teaching is that we can use it and apply it at any time, at any moment in our lives. We just have to pause and pay attention. Pay attention to our experience. We just have to ask, is there suffering right now? Is there suffering right now? If there is, we can look at what is my relationship to my experience that may be causing this suffering? If you're angry about a particular politician or a work colleague or a family member, whatever it is that they're doing And they might be doing something that's really annoying and blah, 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 all of that. But whatever it is that they're doing, if we're caught up in suffering around that, then there's something that we're doing that's not helpful, that's unskillful. The way I often frame it is we are implicated in our suffering. I don't mean by that that we're to blame and that we should flagellate ourselves. We're in an unskillful relationship with our experience, that we're holding on to something in a way that doesn't serve us. And there's a story from the Buddha that I love. I'm sure I've shared before, but it's a really simple one and it's a really powerful one. And it's the story of someone who comes to the Buddha and asks the Buddha, what happens if someone is angry with you about something? How do you deal with that anger? How do you respond to that anger? And the Buddha's teaching, I think is a wonderfully simple one. And he says this, he turns it around to the person who asked the question and he says to them, he says, what happens to you? What do you do if somebody sends you a letter and you don't want that letter? And the person responds, well, I just send it back. I ask the messenger, which would have been how letters got conveyed 2,500 years ago in India, I assume. You know, the messenger, I say, no, I don't want this letter from King Pasenadi or from the local butcher. You know, I don't want this letter. So take it back, you know, return to sender. Cue Elvis, return to sender. And it's really, in the same way, if we're not triggered, if we don't get activated by somebody's anger or whatever they are maybe sending our way, then we don't have to suffer. We can just say, thank you. Or imagine that we're just holding up a mirror to them. You know, so they're looking then at their own anger. We're not taking on their anger. We're not getting caught up in it and hitting the ball back over the net so they hit it over, and we don't just keep batting the anger or the conflict or the, you know, rage or whatever it might be back and forth. We don't have to suffer. You know, we don't have to add on a second arrow to the pain. You know, the pain, the first arrow, the anger comes at us. But it's simply words. It's simply words and emotion. But if we cannot get tangled up in that, we don't have to add a second arrow. The second arrow, of course, is if I say, how dare you say that to me, you jerk, you know, and then they say, well, I'm saying this to you because of this. And well, you did this to me, you know. The Buddha has a lovely sutta, lovely teaching of kids playing on a beach and getting all wrapped around the axle about sandcastles. He did something to my sandcastle, and no, you did something to my sandcastle. And then at the end of the day, the parents call them home. They knock over their sandcastles. They let the sea take the sandcastle, and they don't care about them anymore. But you know, while they've been there, they've been all caught up in that my sandcastle, and mine's bigger than yours. You know, all of that. These second arrows. The suffering we add to the inevitable discomfort that will be there. So just to finish, you know, in your own life, anytime ask yourself, where is the suffering? We can enter through any of these four doors of the Four Noble Truths, through the suffering, through the awareness of clinging, through the seeing clearly and letting go, or through the path of training. So let's just have a quiet minute together, just sitting with whatever's present for you right now. Just be curious about your experience as it is in this moment. I'll finish the talk with a this short pause as well with poem that I've shared here before, certainly at the beginning of the pandemic, from Danusha Lemaris, kind of written. She wrote this poem before the pandemic, but it kind of has echoes. It's her poem, Small Kindnesses. She says, I've been thinking about the way when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by, or how strangers still say, bless you, when someone sneezes, a leftover from the bubonic plague. Don't die, we're saying. And sometimes when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone else will help you pick them up. Mostly we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and to say thank you to the person handing it, to smile at them and for them to smile back, for the waitress to call us honey when she sets down the bowl of clam chowder, and for the red to let us pass. We have so little of each other now, so far from tribe and fire. Only these brief moments of exchange. What if they are the true dwelling of the holy? These fleeting temples we make together when we say, here, have my seat. Go ahead, you first. I like your hat. So take your time coming back, opening your eyes. And now Emily's going to lead us in some mindful movement. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Hugh. Let me invite you to just stand up and sway, allowing your arms to move into the swing, enjoying the movement and being aware of the air, the element of air against your arms. And then reach up, lengthening your arms up, opening your chest. And grasp your left wrist in your right hand. Extend out to the right, reaching that way. You could tilt. Breathe into your left rib cage. Exhale, soften your shoulders down. And then return to center, switch ribs, and reach out to the left, tilting, noticing the breath, expanding out from the base of that right hip through your fingertips. And lift up. Float your arms down, move your shoulders, rolling them back, enjoying that sensation. And move them the other way. Now, let's bring our arms into cactus arms, holding the elbows up. Float your arms down. Inhale, rise. Exhale, floating down. Inhale, rise up. Another shoulder move. Extend your arms out. Turn the left palm up. And on the inhale, switch over, looking at the right palm up as the left goes down and back to the left. Back to the right. One last time to the left. To the right. Let it go. Move your shoulders independently. Soft arms, whatever works here. Move them the other way. And then let's find a forward bend here. Place your hands above your knees. Come into a flat back. Feeling your pelvis, feeling the fold at the hip crease where your hips meet your legs. And then exhale, lower down, however low you wish to go, sensing the energy of your feet, rising up your legs, supporting the pelvis, and also dropping down. Inhaling here, notice your back. Exhale, soften even more, lowering down. And then place your hands above your knees, tuck your tailbone under, soft knees, roll up the spine, bringing energy up, shoulders up around your head, and then soften that. And let's cross wrists. Take your left hand, cross it over your right wrist. So it starts this way, turn your palms together, and just move your arms from side to side, drawing a sideways 8. Come to center, place the left hand on the bottom, and move your arms again. Release, open up, expanding your chest, embracing all of the energy around you. And then bring your arms overhead, palms together, and then bring them to your heart. Turn out to the group, down to the earth, wishing it well. And on the exhale, bring your arms back up. So whoosh, down to your heart, sending compassion and kindness out and down to the earth. And whoosh, and then back to the heart and take a bow. Thank you for your practice.
Thank you, Emily. Lovely. So good to come in to the body and stretch. Thank you, as always. Lovely. So, Kerry asked a question. Hugh, can we access this student's writing that you are quoting? Yes, it's a great question. I don't easily have it accessible just at this moment, but I can definitely get it. And I just have to think about what the easiest way of saying it. If I had it just easily here, I could just post it in there, but I don't have it to hand. I'd have to go off and get it. But if there's some thoughts about an easy way of doing it, I'd be more than happy to share that with folks, whoever's interested, and maybe someone have a bright idea about doing that.
You could contribute it to the email list and see from there, I suppose.
You mean the CML list?
Yeah.
That's a good idea. That's a great idea. Yeah, let's do it that way. And if you're not on the CML list, that'd be an encouragement to join the CML, the Centre for Mindful Living list. So I'll do that. Thank you. I think today what we'll do is we'll stay in the full group, and I just invite whoever would like to share. If any responses you have to the meditation, to the movement, to the talk, anything you'd like to share, any questions you might have, please feel free. and just raise your hand or do it virtually through the I think reactions. Yeah, raise hand if you find that there. Two participants. Right. I see. Who do I see? Oh, Heather. Yes, please, Heather.
Hi, thanks, Hugh. Hi, everyone. It occurred to me when you were talking about the letting go, the quote from your student, we're all searching for something and we take, and instead of finding what we want, we, get in these habits or addictions or unskillful ways of dealing. There's a number of habits. I'm sure it won't be a surprise to you. There's a number of habits I'd like to change, and they're pretty strong ones. And I find it occurred to me when you're talking, people in society, sometimes it's even psychologists, social workers, but people to some extent reinforce some of the, when you express that you have a concern about your life, gee, I'd like to stop doing this. I wish I could do this more. Friends and sometimes counselors will say, oh, but it's relaxing for you. Oh, but, you're going through a lot in your life. There's a lot of life circumstances. So it's just a reinforcement of the opposite of letting go, in a way. And it's not, I don't expect an answer or anything, but it's it's nice not to be beat up upon by others. But sometimes I find it provides me more excuses to keep going as I'm going. Oh, yes. Remember yes, I'm going through this, I'm going through that. Therefore, right. I'm justified. Of course, I can't quit doing this or that or the other habit I'm trying to get out of. So that's my thought. And it doesn't matter if you want to respond or not, but
thank you, Heather. No, I think it's a really important point. What comes to me is, like so many things in our practice, so many situations, it's really finding that space, the wise place, because there's definitely a wisdom in taking care of ourselves, looking after ourselves, being kind to ourselves, all of these things. Definitely there's a not to beat ourselves up and all of the things that, just reinforce negativity, reinforce suffering, etc. But I think what we need to pay attention to is, when those, self-comforting things that we're doing are in fact another form of avoidance, a way of avoiding feeling what we're feeling. And the question really for me is what I'm doing, is it actually leading to well-being, to happiness, to freedom, or is it really keeping me locked in that cycle of suffering? And I think of it when people are dealing with trauma, for example. Now, just the everyday practice of being present with their experience typically isn't going to be helpful when they're caught up in let's say, a traumatic memory, And so there are skillful ways in which, for example, I'm very familiar with Peter Levine's work on healing somatic experience, mind-body approach to healing trauma, where there's a kind of a going in and a coming out. He calls it pendulation, and also titration, doing it a piece at a time. That's a very wise approach in that situation. So, because you need to, if you go right into the middle of it, the mind goes, no, I'm out of here, or else it gets flooded, So finding that, that way we can go in and come out, that's a really wise way of working with, a difficult, really painful experience, and learning to expand that window of tolerance, I think is the term often used in psychology, of being able to, I can be with this. I can be with a little bit more, maybe a little bit more, but couldn't necessarily just jump in the middle and start being with all of this. It's too much when we first do it. So is that what we're doing? Is it skillful in that way, with that overall intention of leading to greater freedom, and not just having the intention, but actually, based on our experience, actually leading more in that direction? Or is it keeping me kind of hooked on that, in that kind of cycle of suffering? And so, as is the case with many of the things, like what you raised, Heather, it's like having to find that that sweet spot, in a way of, is it this, is this the wise place? What is the wise place? And that's kind of what I would say here, and hope that there's something useful in that, of kind of like, okay, thinking about that, because there isn't I don't think there's a clear set. I mean, there isn't a clear answer, it's this, it's always this, it's never that, it's always this, And so I hope is that useful, Heather?
Just the observation of it and thinking about it is useful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. And Gabriella, would you please share anything you'd like?
Good morning. For me, so much of the talk resonated. Having a history of addiction myself, your students' feedback, or what she commented, was right in line with so much of my own experience, whether it was an eating disorder, over exercising, compulsive eating, or even anorexia or drinking. Like, it didn't matter. The whole, but it was always, the way that I looked at it was like, addiction is an octopus with all of these different legs, and that it still came from the same place, and it is true. Like, underneath all of that is this wanting to self-soothe, to not feel the discomfort of the craving, to not sit with the anxiety, all of that, right? The other part, though, that really, and how intolerable sometimes those cravings feel. They feel like you're just not going to be able to make through until you learn, like you said, to go touch it and then come back, and then touch it and come back. The other part is I've had a lot of health issues and difficulties physically, and there's that clinging to, when I get better, right? When I get better, I can do this, that, and the other thing. When I heal, I can do this, that, and the other thing. And so much is attached to that, and a lot, there's levels of being able to kind of be in acceptance and surrender, and then there's other times when I am just clinging to this being over, and it's a whole nother addiction to being like it was, right? Like I was before. So that has been the difficulty for me most recently. And in addition to that, the pain and the discomfort has sparked a lot of wanting to self-soothe with food, like tremendous amounts of the cravings getting bigger. So having kind of the double whammy. Anyway, any feedback would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriella. I don't have a lot beyond what I've already said, because I think from what you shared and what you shared at other times, what you need to do, and it's more the practice of doing that, of just being very clear of what your intentions are, of what's really important to you, really paying attention, bringing a lot of compassion in to you for yourself, because, as you said, it's not easy. It feels like, at times overwhelming, too much. So we need all of the supports. So really, it's all about everything I talked about in that talk. It's bringing, seeing where the clinging is, and bringing in all of the skillful practices we can of compassion, of loving kindness, of equanimity, of obviously of mindfulness, of really all of the Dharma that we have, and probably most important, I think, the self-compassion, the holding, because the self-compassion creates the container that allows us to hold the experience and be with the experience. And then there's the being with itself, and all of the insights and the understandings of impermanence, of non-self, even while we're feeling this really is about me and my pain or my suffering or my clinging, that ultimately, the emptiness of all of this, and that if and when we can create a wholesome relationship with our experience, it actually transforms the experience, and as many people have experienced, that becomes the path of really letting go of clinging, letting go of addiction. So I think what the path is and what the things we need, you need to do, but it's helpful just, I think, to keep hearing it. And I think, the last thing that I didn't mention so explicitly is obviously the support of community. And that's what we're doing here. We're doing it. It's like you're not off there in a dark room on your own, that sometimes we feel we are, but we're here together and we're talking, and we're, the talks and the reflections and the sharing and the meditation together helps us create that container that allows us to hold it. So remembering all the resources, remembering all the skillful means that are available, that I think can be really important, particularly when we're in the middle of something. Because when we're in the middle of it, we're feeling like, no, everything's terrible, nothing's possible, and we go into the catastrophizing mode. So the more we can come back and kind of grab the banister, as it were, and kind of say, oh yeah, I'm not alone. I have my breath, I have the body, I have the teachings to come back to. So anyway, I hope that's helpful, Gabrielle.
Yeah, thank you for the reminder on the self-compassion piece. I think that's another part that I really need to focus on. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriella. And I know Havili found it difficult to focus too much with the bird.
I'm going to put him back. Actually, he's a little distracted. He's more than a little distracting for me as well. Thank you.
Yeah, better than the monkey, having the
yes,
monkey.
Yeah, he's not too far off though.
Yeah, get the monkey off my back. Thank you, Gabrielle. Havili? You're still on mute. Ah.
Can't hear you.
Yeah. Can you? No, we can't hear you, Havili. And you're not on mute. That's funny. I wish I could do sign language, and that we do. Maybe just do this one. Thank you, Havili. Maybe it'll come back in a while. But let's pause here. And Misha says, here's a Tara Brach talk that includes some teachings around trauma, the window of tolerance, and what might be skillful means in different circumstances. When overwhelmed or flooded, including in a PTSD flashback calming and being grounded and present in order to attempt to come back into the window of tolerance is a first line approach. Thank you. I think that's really helpful. And I don't know if I'm familiar with that particular talk, but I know Tara's really wonderful teacher in this area, and many others as well. Looking to Holly shared earlier, and my son said yesterday that he's upset about everything going on in the world and didn't understand why more people weren't as angry. I tried to explain that I choose to focus on the things I can control and not spend emotions on the things outside of my control. He has more of an activist mind than I do and wants to take on the world. How do I nurture that and help him not be miserable at the same time? That's it's a really great question, Holly. One of the things I should mention, and I was planning to mention later, is that I'm going to be doing, along with some other folks, we're doing some sessions which I'm calling "Bringing Our Practice into the World," and it's kind of a broadly looking at, taking our practice, if you like, off the cushion, not just into activism, and that may be right for some people or a lot of people, but not for everyone. But others, it may be, bringing our awareness into our work as a therapist or as a first responder or as a parent or as a, somebody in the community. Just how the kind of the theme really is how our practice can support us, how our practice can support us in engaging in the world in that broader definition of the world, not just politics, although the engagement in activism will definitely be a part of it. And I'm going to be doing a lot of work around that this fall. I'm doing this road trip in late September and early October in the middle of the country, and one of the main themes is bringing our practice into the world, and I'll be doing some events in places like Minneapolis and Duluth and Kansas City and other places. Anyway, but just to say, rather than trying to get into that in any depth today, I very much invite you and others who might want to engage in that. I'm going to hopefully have a date for the first of those in the next couple of days, certainly by the middle of this coming week. So just wanted to let you know that. Why don't we finish with a short meditation, maybe 3 to 5 minutes, to kind of tie things up internally, as it were, to finish us up internally. So let your eyes close if that's comfortable to you. Maybe take a deeper breath or two. And just settling again. Notice what's going on in the mind. If there's a lot of busyness, a lot of thinking, just come back into the body. Feel your breathing. Feel the sensations in your body. Opening to what's here right now with kindness, with care. This, I think, kind of resonates for me in the terms of the theme of the talk today, the class today. This is from our old friend, Rumi. It's called Bird Wings. Your grief for what you've lost lifts a mirror up to where you're bravely working. Expecting the worst, you look, and instead, here's the joyful face you've been waiting to see. Your hand opens and closes and opens and closes. If it were always a fist or always stretched open, you would be paralyzed. Your deepest presence is in every small contracting and expanding, the two as beautifully balanced and coordinated as bird wings. Taking a moment to appreciate your effort in being here today, in practicing, supporting each other, everyone else in their practice here, and appreciating everyone who's here. Wishing everyone well. May you be happy, may you be safe. Wishing that all beings everywhere be free from suffering, free from harm, free from clinging. So coming back, we'll finish with a few announcements. I'm just going to share a couple of things. One, I have a course coming up, some of you may know, in October, beginning October 18th. It's a 6-week course. It's on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the Satipatthana Sutta, but the Buddha's major teaching on mindfulness in the whole of the teachings. It's been called the most important teaching in the whole of the Pali Canon by one leading writer and translator. It's certainly the major teaching of the Buddha on mindfulness, and it's a wonderful teaching that really encompasses all of the mindfulness teachings, in the Buddhist tradition and the secular mindfulness tradition as well. So that goes from October 18th to November 22nd, 6 Tuesday evenings. Love if you could join me for that. I mentioned about these, I'm going to have monthly sessions. I believe they're going to be Monday evenings from 7 to 9 online. And as I say, once a month, going through this year, and if there's interest into 2023 as well, particularly with everything that's going on in the world and in the country. And I'll share dates on that coming pretty soon. And then got a weekend retreat that I'm teaching with Rebecca up at the center in just southern Pennsylvania, just over the border, the Maryland border with Pennsylvania, at the retreat center, Jewish retreat center there, October 14th to 16th. So please check that out. It's a lovely space and lovely time to actually be together and practice in person. And then other thing I have is in December, I'm teaching a weekend at Kripalu on a weekend retreat on mindfulness and loving kindness. So if you like Kripalu and you go up that way, I'll be up there then. And then thank you, Emily, for sharing the information on donations. As almost everyone knows, there's no cost or charge for these classes. They're on a donation basis. If you feel inclined to make a donation, the donations support the teachers, help me to continue teaching. And it's a tradition that comes down through 2,500 years from the time of the Buddha and maybe beyond that as well. So thank you for your kindness and support.